911. The Post Hoc Ergo Propter Hoc question. By Edmund Matthews.
CJ, on your tombstone, it's going to read Post Hoc Ergo Propter Hoc.
Okay, but none of my visitors are going to be able to understand my tombstone.
27 lawyers in the room. Anybody know Post Hoc Ergo Propter Hoc? Josh?
Post, after hoc, ergo, therefore, after hoc, therefore, something else hoc.
Thank you. Next.
Well, if I got more credit on the 443 thing.
Leo.
After it, therefore, because of it.
After it, therefore, because of it. It means one thing follows the other, therefore it was caused by the other. But it's not always true. In fact, it's hardly ever true.
The gist of Post Hoc Ergo Propter Hoc is this. If a man walks into a room and flicks a light switch and a light comes on, he is very likely to assume that flicking the light switch caused the light to come on, as one thing happened immediately after the other. However, it is not necessarily true. There may be another man in the room next door who is peering through a hole in the wall, watching to see when the switch is flicked, and then he flicks another switch that causes the light to come on. Not likely, but possible. Furthermore, if a man walks into a room and flicks a light switch, and a minute later a light comes on, then he is less likely to assume a causal relationship between flicking the switch and the light coming on. If a man walks into a room and flicks a light switch and an hour later a light comes on, he is even less likely to assume a causal relationship between flicking the switch and the light coming on. If a man walks into a room and flicks a light switch and a day later a light comes on, then he is even less likely to assume a causal relationship between flicking the switch and the light coming on. However, it remains possible. There could be a timer, for example, that delays the light coming on a minute, an hour, or a day later. So, how does this relate to 9/11? Well, it poses a very interesting question, because had they, whoever they may be, wanted to convince the world that the planes hitting the buildings caused the buildings to collapse, then why leave any time between the two events? And it really doesn't matter whether it's a matter of pressing play on a piece of pre-prepared footage created in a computer, or whether you're pushing down on an Acme plunger tied to tons of TNT or thermite or whatever, or if you're pressing a big red button on a directed energy weapon. The question remains the same. Why leave any time between the plane or missile or computer graphics or whatever it was that hit the buildings and the buildings collapsing? Some will immediately say that they wanted to sell a story of structural failure as a result of fire, and this would take some time to happen. However, this didn't convince many people, and those people went on to convince others that something wasn't quite as it might seem. They would have had a very hard time doing so had the plane hit the building and the building immediately collapsed. It would have been very difficult to convince anyone that one thing did not cause the other, because of the assumption of causality that would come from the immediate succession of the two events. I saw the plane hit the building and the building collapsed. I'm pretty sure one thing caused the other, they would say, and no amount of reasoned argument would be likely to sway them. The fact that there is a period of time between the plane hitting the building and the building collapsing allows for reasonable doubt as to whether one thing caused the other. So, why the gap? Whatever theory you go by, and it really doesn't matter whether it's a matter of pressing play on a piece of pre-prepared footage created in a computer, or whether you're pushing down on an Acme plunger tied to tons of TNT or thermite or whatever, or if you're pressing a big red button on a directed energy weapon. The question remains the same. Why is there a necessity for a period of time between the planes or missiles or computer graphics hitting the buildings and the buildings collapsing, however long that period of time may have been? Now, it is not good enough simply to answer the question, why is there a period of time between the plane hitting the building and the building collapsing? You must answer the question, why is the period of time between the plane hitting the building and the building collapsing as long as it is, however long that may have been? It really doesn't matter whether it's a matter of pressing play on a piece of pre-prepared footage created in a computer, or whether you're pushing down on an Acme plunger tied to tons of TNT or thermite or whatever, or if you're pressing a big red button on a directed energy weapon. The question remains the same. The plane hits the building. Some time passes during this period of time. It is a don't push the button situation, till at some point it becomes a push the button situation. What is the causal factor in this change? What is the critical factor that allows for the button to be pushed, whereas before, however long it was since the plane hit the building, it was not to be pushed? Or, to put it another way, however long the period of time was between the plane hitting the building and the building collapsing, why not 5 minutes more? Why not 5 minutes less? There must have been some reason why the button was pressed when it was. Now some will say that it is because that was what was prescribed in the script. However, the question remains, why not 5 minutes more or 5 minutes less? Now some will say it's because that's how long they predicted a structural collapse would convincingly take. To which begs the question, would have 5 minutes more been more or less convincing? Moreover, this still doesn't answer the question as to why there is any period of time between the plane hitting the building and the building collapsing, as structural failure could be instant, and delayed structural failure leads to doubt as to the cause. Any theory of 9/11 that cannot answer these two questions satisfactorily, in my view, is not a complete theory, and moreover, I believe in coming to a satisfactory answer to these questions we may finally figure out how it was done. Answers on a postcard, please.